We just got two new crystal balls logged in Miami's favor for the class of 2025, including one for a consensus top 5 prospect.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this busy episode of Locked On Canes, we will talk about Cam Ward building chemistry with his wideouts and who Ward says the X factor is going to be this year. We're going to talk about how good Miami's roster is compared to the rest of the Atlantic Coast Conference. We are going to talk a little conference realignment today as well. We'll have the latest intel on DJ Pickett, who's got his announcement coming up in under a week now. We'll talk about these new crystal balls. And yes, of course, guys, it's been a huge topic this week on Locked On Canes. How busy next week is going to be in terms of announcements with DJ Pickett 6 days away from his July 17th announcement. The day after that, defensive lineman Jarquez Carter, who Miami is in the mix for, is announcing. Jabari Antoine, 4-star cornerback, who Miami's very much in the mix for, is announcing on the 20th. And, Vernell Brown, the third, Miami would love to land that 4-star wide receiver. I don't necessarily think the Canes are favored for that one, but he's going to be announcing on the 21st. So it's going to be super busy. But it's not even just those 4 players we're talking about right now, guys, because there are a couple of new crystal ball predictions from Miami to land. One player we've talked about a lot on Locked On Canes, and another player we haven't talked about nearly enough. But let's talk about the player we've talked about quite a bit. In fact, we were just talking yesterday with Brian Smith about Iose Epenesa, one of the top defensive linemen, edge rushers in the class of 2025. This guy is a consensus 5-star recruit out of Illinois. He's got a brother playing with the Buffalo Bills. He's had multiple family members who have gone and played at Iowa. So the Iowa Hawkeyes have been very much involved in his recruitment. But we did read you guys the excerpt yesterday from an Iowa insider at 24/7 Sports who did mention that the buzz is, it's not to say that they weren't pretty confident from an Iowa standpoint with Iose, but the buzz is, he would not be opposed to going in a different direction from his family members in terms of picking somewhere other than Iowa. And lo and behold, we get the On3 prediction of a crystal ball. They call them the RPM predictions. This one comes from Gary Ferman, who's a friend of mine. He's been covering Miami for as long as anybody. Gary Ferman at CaneSport On3 has logged an RPM prediction for Miami to land 5-star edge rusher Iose Epenesa. And for a little bit more on Epenesa, I mentioned we just talked about him with the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith. This scouting report is going to give you guys an idea of what Miami can expect if they're able to beat out Iowa and Utah and Missouri for Iose Epenesa.
His recruitment is hard to follow, but everybody wants him. Like, we knew about him when he was a sophomore. Like, everybody knew about this kid, and I'm sure Miami was already recruiting him. So I wish I had more insight, but like, he's just at a random high school, and he's just really, really good. Like, he's the strong side defensive end that can pass rush. That's the rarest of the rare kind of deal. You need those guys to get over the top. Like Ruben can play strong side end and lead your team in sacks. You can't prepare for guys like this. Kid's like that. He could be a dominant player as a freshman, just like Ruben.
So you got to love that comparison that Iose Epenesa, who has received an RPM prediction, that's the equivalent of a crystal ball, to land with the Miami Hurricanes, that if he winds up here in that class of 2025, he could have that sort of an impact as a freshman that Ruben Bain had last year with Miami. And of course, sidebar, I'm incredibly excited to see the kind of impact Ruben Bain can have this coming year as a sophomore after recording 7.5 sacks and 12.5 tackles for loss last season Epenesa is that sort of player. And it's funny because Epenesa, rightfully so, gets recognized as a 5-star, as he should. Our guy Ruben, for whatever reason, was a 4-star coming out of high school, which is criminally underrated, but that's neither here nor there. You love to hear this idea that Iose Epenesa could be trending towards the Miami Hurricanes. I don't know for sure when he plans to announce his verbal commitment, so we'll have to keep our eyes on the timeline. But folks, this is one of the very best defensive ends, defensive linemen in the class of 2025. And we know how well Miami did recruiting the defensive line just last year, right? That was Jason Taylor's first year as a full-time defensive end coach. Joe Salavea, of course, works Jason Taylor, defensive line coach officially. He works primarily with the ends. His co-defensive line coach, Joe Salavea, of course, was very involved in recruitment as well. Artavius Jones, landing him, I think, had a lot to do with Big Joe. But Miami landed last year 3 5-star defensive linemen with Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, and Marquise Lightfoot. I don't expect them to land 3 more 5 stars, but Epenesa might now be trending to the U, and that is music to my ears. And that wasn't the only crystal ball that Miami received yesterday. That one was from Gary Ferman for Miami to land Epenesa. We also received a Fong bomb. Steve Wilftong, who's usually not wrong, has predicted Miami to land 4-star wide receiver Daylyn Upshaw. He's from Central High School, but not the Central you're thinking of. He's from Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama. And Miami's done well these past couple of cycles recruiting players from that part of the country. Bobby Pruitt last year, who's looking really good. So Miami maybe can continue getting players out of the, I think it's, the Yellowhammer State is what we call Alabama. Cole McConaughey, another one that Miami landed last year. And in the case of Daylyn Upshaw, this is a player that we have not talked about nearly enough on Locked On Canes, and I apologize for that. 5'11", 175 pounds. What I really like about Daylyn Upshaw is he can play anywhere. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. He's got a lot of versatility. And, he plays at a good high school district in Alabama. His numbers last year as a junior in high school, a lot of times it takes you 2 seasons to put up these type of numbers as a wideout. He caught 59 balls last year for 1,185 yards, 15 touchdown catches, and he averaged over 20 yards per catch this past year. And he's also big in the 7-on-7 scene. Did well down here. I think it was the Battle 7-on-7 event down here. That was per Steve Wiltfong, noted that. So yeah, Miami receives a Fong bomb to land Daylyn Upshaw. And I know that a lot of us have been saying in recent weeks, it's like, yeah, we're doing pretty well in recruiting, but where are the receivers? What's happening with the receivers? And a lot of folks were upset to see, Cortez Mills, local out of Homestead, committing to Oklahoma. Wide receiver's been a weird one in this class. We'll talk more about it. Hopefully Miami can get Daylyn Upshaw over the finish line. And if Miami can land Upshaw, that would be great, because I'll tell you who Miami's not going to land, unfortunately, is Dallas Wilson. So there had been a lot of chatter for months that Dallas Wilson, 4-star, I think even some of the services have him as a 5-star wide receiver, was at some point going to decommit from Oregon, and Miami would have been probably the team in the best position to flip him from his Oregon commitment. That is no longer on the table. So last night, Dallas Wilson, in his words, he killed all the noise and he shut down his recruitment. He reaffirmed that he is an Oregon Duck and he's not going to be flipping. Now, those of you who are members of our Locked On Canes Insiders chat, I told you guys that was going to happen yesterday evening, so you didn't have to stay up till 10 p.m. to see Dallas Wilson make it official that, yeah, the buzz for the past few weeks had been that Wilson will probably stick with Oregon. Dan Lanning locked that one down, and he's not going anywhere. So Wilson was, someone Miami had been recruiting heavily. He had a good official visit, lots of unofficial visits down here. He plays in Tampa, so he's a lot closer to Miami than he is to Oregon. But no, Dallas Wilson will not be flipping. He has reaffirmed his pledge to the Oregon Ducks, okay? We also, when we come back, I want to give you guys this should make you a little more optimistic, as we're 6 days away from an announcement. Good or bad, we're 6 days away from an announcement for top player in the state of Florida, another Tampa area player who's considering Oregon. I hope that doesn't go the way Dallas Wilson went. DJ Pickett is going to be announcing on July 17th. Not only did Steve Wilftong drop that crystal ball from Miami to land Daylyn Upshaw, Mr. Fong, vice president at On3 Sports, also gave us some encouraging words about Pickett. We'll talk about that and so much more when we come back right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. And folks, I am all about FanDuel. Guys, we've been winning money. We won money on England yet. I don't even like international soccer. I'm a homer for Italy and for the USA. But we won some money on England yesterday, advancing through the Netherlands. And it is all happening on FanDuel, guys. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. I know the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals are behind us, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood to do so. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. By the way, I'm looking at the Euro final coming up this weekend. I think I like Spain. Spain's been the best team in that tournament. I think I like Spain minus 136 against England. So that's the way I'm going to go with that one. So you guys want to check that out. International soccer is so much fun, and FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Folks, we love this Locked On network, and Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming like you get on Fox Sports and ESPN. It's called Locked On Sports Today, and it brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So I know that a lot of the noise nationally about DJ Pickett, 5-star cornerback out of Zephyr Hills High School in the Tampa, Florida area, top player in the state of Florida. A lot of the noise nationally has been primarily in the direction of the Oregon Ducks. There are a couple of On3 crystal balls for Pickett to land at Oregon. Thankfully, not from Steve Wilftong, because that's, usually the guy who knows best. In fact, Wilftong is not shutting the door on Miami. So heading into that July 17th announcement, Oregon is seen by most to be the slight trending leader, with Miami right there. LSU is going to be the third hat on the table. Most people feel like LSU is behind Oregon and Miami. Based on what we know here at Locked On Canes, I feel cautiously optimistic that Miami's going to be the move. I'm not putting out a Donno ball or anything. I'm not quite that confident yet. We're still 6 days out. We'll know more within a couple of days of that announcement. But Wilftong said this yesterday, actually on the On3 Miami boards, that should make Miami fans feel slightly more comfortable. He said, quote, "Last night, I got a call that Miami might be trending here. It will be a battle this last week, but it's looking better around here being Miami." So that's on DJ Pickett. Steve Wilftong, he got a call. Somebody made a call to the Wilftong bat phone that Miami could be the one trending for DJ Pickett. So get your popcorn ready, fellas. This is going to be a suspenseful 6 days coming up as we head into July 17th. Okay. Oh, man. All right. So I want to answer some awesome questions that you guys sent us to the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. And if you want to sign up, you can send me questions. We answer them on shows. I also give you guys recruiting scoops, breaking news, show updates. Click the link in the show description below. Become a Locked On Canes Insider. You can try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. We get a question from Quan the Cane, who says, "Donno, do we have the best two deep in the ACC? What position groups could sustain multiple injuries and we could get by a few games?" All right, Quan, don't take my word for it. But you guys remember a couple weeks ago, we had a Pro Football Focus analyst on, Dalton Wasserman, who is not a Miami fan. He's not biased for or against Miami in any way, but he told us, like, he didn't outright predict Miami to win the ACC, but he did tell us Miami has the most talented roster in the ACC and also the most well-rounded roster, because Miami has, in his words, the best defensive line in the conference. He's pretty high on the front seven or the front six, depending on, what formation you're running. A little concerned about the secondary because there's unproven talent there, but he's very high on Miami's defensive front, and couldn't be more high on Miami's offense, right? They can beat you on the ground. They can beat you through the air. All of this is on paper, of course. So, a lot of the other good teams in the ACC are going to rely more maybe on their defense or more on their running game. Miami has the most well-rounded roster in the ACC in his eyes. And yeah, for the most part, I would say the two deep. Now, if you're asking me what position groups could survive, the most turnover, I'd like to say the edge rusher rotation, because you've basically got 5 or 6 guys at edge rusher who could be starters most places, right? I mean, when you've got Elijah Alston and Ruben Bain and Tyler Barron and Akeem Mesidor and Cole McConaughey and Marquise Lightfoot and Armando Blunt coming in, he could play inside and outside, like, not that we ever want to see injuries or turnover. I would like Miami to be completely healthy all season long and be able to rotate these guys in and not have just constantly have fresh legs and no drop off. But you've got to think the edge rusher rotation is really, really deep there. You could say, because one of the issues Miami's had over the last couple of years is you've always had, unfortunately, a lot of bad luck with your running back group. And so your depth has been really tested there. Miami now looks so deep at running back that they seem like they'll be able to handle that sort of thing. I would say the same for tight end now this year, although, again, you had your tight end room was derailed by injuries last year. But I think, adding Elijah Lofton is going to just be such a luxury there. Riley Williams, Elijah Arroyo healthy again. And I would say receiver outside of Xavier Restrepo, he's irreplaceable. So listen, I think those are some of the groups, and of course you don't want anything to happen to Cam Ward, because I think he's going to be the primary driver that makes this team special this year. But yeah, Miami's deep, and I think Miami probably, I don't know if they have for sure the best 2 deep in the ACC, but I think they have on paper the most talented roster in the ACC. That doesn't guarantee you win the conference, because Florida State and Clemson, they've been there recently. Miami is still learning how to win. And, hopefully you can exercise some of these demons where you don't underachieve, because Miami has tended to underachieve a lot. But the talent is there. The talent is there for Miami to make that leap. We get a question from Dan who says, hey, any word on the latest with Cam Ward and his receiving core, like favorite targets so far? Well, okay, so Ward recently, he went on with the Marlins radio broadcast. Like, he was in the booth chatting with the guys, and like one of the excerpts or the clips that got my attention over the past couple of days was apparently Ward. He referred to Jacoby George as being the X factor, which I could see that. And Jacoby George had a really good spring, had a really good season last year. Jacoby George is an explosive playmaker. Right. He just needs to find consistency with not getting those, unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Like if he can sort that stuff out, just be a little less emotional on the field, or just like channel your emotion, like for the plays, not the stuff between plays, then Jacoby George is going to be awesome this year. So Ward mentioned him. Obviously they're doing workouts, off-season workouts right now. I haven't heard a lot about the Sam Brown connection, but remember, Ward and Sam Brown actually worked out before Brown even committed to Miami. So I would imagine the two of them have gotten together since Brown actually enrolled at the U. But if we go back to what I saw in spring football between March and April, the Ward Restrepo connection, it's right there. Like if you thought it might take Restrepo a little time to build chemistry with a new quarterback, it took them like 3 seconds to build chemistry. Isaiah Horton also had a really good spring, and some of the young guys as well. And obviously the young guys were catching passes from multiple different quarterbacks, because sometimes they were catching passes from the 2s and the 3s. But, JoJo Trader and Nye Carr, Ray Joseph, they all had really good springs. And I can tell you, Ward has gone the extra mile to work out off schedule as much as possible and also do team building activities and get-togethers to build the off-field chemistry. So I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised when you see Ward start running Miami's offense. It's going to look like he's been doing it for a couple of years. I don't think there's going to be too much of a learning curve there. And he's also pretty comfortable with the offense, having played in something similar previously in his college career. We get a question from our guy, Al, who says, hey, what do you think the Canes will beat the Baby Lizards by? I'm saying 3 touchdowns, Al says. All I'll say is just win the game. If it's by a point, if you need to see our guy, Andy Borregales, if he lines up for a game-winning field goal, Miami's down 2, Borregales hits the game winner, you win the game by 1, I'll take it. If they win it by 3 touchdowns, I will take it. I'm not going to make a score prediction. First of all, it's way too early to do that. Second of all, I'm a little superstitious. So I don't want to make a score prediction yet. Just win the game. It'd be fun to blow them out in Florida at the Swamp and create all those negative narratives that would come. And people are talking about that a lot. I think Josh Pate recently had a segment about that on the Late Kick, where he talked about how whoever loses that game, Miami or Florida, that everything's going to get so toxic with the fan base, the losing fan base. I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to be on the toxic side. I want Florida to be on the toxic side. I want them to be talking about what they do with Billy Napier's buyout and who comes in to replace. I don't want to be on the toxic side of it. So I just want to win the game at all costs. Oh man, we got more questions to answer on the other side, including a conference realignment question. Things took an interesting turn. Now, I don't know. Again, I don't know who to believe because there's so much conference realignment rumors and news, supposed news that gets put out there. Most of it is rubbish, but there is an interesting development in conference realignment that makes you chuckle just a little bit. Folks, we're not done yet. You want to keep it locked on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. And guys, Locked On, we have a network of over 200 shows. Like I talked about earlier, unfortunately, Dallas Wilson, a guy Miami was recruiting, decided to stick with Oregon. For more on that, you should be checking out Spencer McLaughlin on Locked On Oregon. He does an awesome job. Even if you want to get educated on the other side of that big game on August 31st, I do recommend, and he's a friend of the show and a friend of mine, our guy Brandon Olson does an awesome job on Locked On Gators. So if you want to scout the enemy between now and August 31st, I highly recommend checking out Brandon's show. And you know what? Brandon and I will probably do several more crossover episodes before that game even kicks off. All right, so we get a question from the 787 who says, hey, this is a repeat question from me, but he says the mismanagement of the wide receiver board. We have no commitments, and I certainly do not believe the wait-and-see approach that you mentioned. Cam Ward will not be here. He's talking about the following year. He says our 2025 starting quarterback is not on the roster as it will be a transfer. I don't know how you know that. He says, so for me, you should have secured very nice recruits locally before shooting for the 5 stars. Betting on flipping on recruits will bite you sooner rather than later. Okay, so I know there's I don't think he referred to him by name, but there's a lot of, and I get it, a lot of disappointment locally as to how the Cortez Mills recruitment played out. And also, Nashawn Montgomery, where players, a lot of people thought Miami should have gone harder for these guys. Without knowing exactly what's on Miami's recruiting board and without having access to Miami's evals and also not having access to the sort of conversations Miami staff is having with players like Jamie French, without me having all that information, I'm not going to sit here and condemn the approach to Miami recruiting wide receivers. They had 3 guys in the class last year. I think this year they were definitely going for specific guys, because it's not over yet, quality over quantity this year. Not to say you landed all quality guys last year, but I don't think you're trying to land 3 guys. Maybe you're trying to land maybe 2 this year, and you're going for quality. So, obviously missing out on Dallas Wilson, which is basically official now. That's a disappointment. But Miami, there still is some buzz with Jamie French. We'll see how it plays out. As mentioned on this episode, Miami has the crystal ball for Daylyn Upshaw. We'll see what happens with Vernell Brown. I'm not optimistic right now, but we're 10 days away from that one, so a lot can potentially change in 10 days. And I don't think Miami's given up on Joshua Moore because, okay, Moore verbally committed to Florida, but guess what? If a lot of those predictions come true about Billy Napier not making it through the season, then that one's going to be wide open again. So I understand the disappointment. It would not be fair for me to condemn the approach without knowing all the information that Miami staff has, because guess what? Kevin Beard, that's a guy that I give the benefit of the doubt to. I give the benefit of the doubt to KB that guy knows what he's doing. But I appreciate your question, and I understand your concerns. And I will also remind you, it is just July still, and Miami's going to have 12 games to play this upcoming season. And if they do win on the field, some of these problems are going to work themselves out. If they don't win on the field, then yeah, we can be concerned a little bit. All right, we get a question from D Chef 715, one of my favorites. He said, I see we've had commitments in varied positions, but nothing really at receiver. He says, am I to believe that our season coming up is what is going to make the difference at the recruiting for receivers? Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of answered this question already. I think it's going to go a long way. I think if Miami does go, and I know that it was a good point by 787 that, hey, Ward's not going to be here next year. So any receivers you recruit, they know they won't be playing with Cam Ward. But if you still see big numbers in the passing game being put up with this offense, it is going to help sway some wide receivers. So, yeah, I think there is some importance in that coming up. Get a question from Storm Life, Ricky Bobby from Storm Life, who says, hey, if you play NCAA football dynasty mode, what will be your first order of business on the offseason, whether it be in recruiting, coaching, stadium, change of conference, uniforms, etc.? It's definitely not uniforms. You guys know I don't care if you're wearing like potato sacks. Just go out there and win. That's all I care about. It's going to be recruiting. So I used to, and obviously it's been more than a decade since I played the NCAA football game. It's now college football is what they call it. It's coming back after 12 years. But I would love to play Dynasty, and I would love recruiting. And that's why for me, like, you can't get that on Madden. Like the Madden franchise mode, you're drafting, but it's different from recruiting. I love the recruiting aspect of the video game. So that's going to be my priority. In fact, a lot of times I'm going to focus on recruiting, and then I'm going to simulate a lot of the games during the season so I can get to the next recruiting cycle. So it's recruiting for me. Maybe I'll maybe after I focus on recruiting, I might try to build an on-campus stadium. Is that possible on the video game? Apparently it's difficult in real life to get an on-campus stadium. Maybe on the video game I can get that done somewhere. I'll tear down one of the academic buildings and say, who cares about academics? Let's build a new football stadium. I'll do something like that. Okay, we get this question from one of our great everydayers, Bob in Louisville, who says, hey, I would love an update on conference realignment. So, okay, this started coming out yesterday. Now, Big 12 media days are going on this week in Las Vegas. I'm going to be at the ACC media days starting about a week and a half from now on July 22nd. So I'm going to be doing shows from out there. I'm going to be reporting from out there. I will keep you guys informed on everything that happens at the ACC kickoff. But actually, the latest conference realignment buzz, because we've all been talking about Florida State and Clemson. They're suing the ACC. Everyone's been talking about FSU and Clemson. They're going to land in the Big Ten. That's been the primary rumor. But suddenly, Ross Dellinger at Yahoo, who's one of the better, more reliable college football reporters out there, is saying the Big 12 right now is making a big push for Florida State and Clemson, and there apparently have been some early dialogue there. Now, I would find it hilarious if that were to happen, because I see all these Florida State fans who have been trolling Miami fans for months like, we're going to the Big 10, and you losers are probably going to end up in the Big 12. Embarrassing, the Big 12. That's a lateral move. And what if they end up in the Big 12? So they've been trolling us for months. Now, I know some folks are saying, well, Florida State, if they're talking to the Big 12, that's just the backup plan, that the Big 10 is the primary landing spot. The Big 12 is like a backup plan. And supposedly, and I don't know if I like this. So the way that the Big 12, if they were to add Florida State and Clemson, then they would look to add others after that. So maybe they try to add Miami too and some others. But the Big 12 apparently would use private equity money to pay Clemson and Florida State higher revenue than the rest of their conference. Now, I am a capitalist, but when it comes to being on the whole lending, borrowing thing, I much prefer to be on the lending side than on the borrowing side. Because if you're talking about taking on potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of private equity debt, I don't know if that's a great idea for the Big 12 long term. But Brett Yormark, their commissioner, is very aggressive on expansion. But yeah, I find it funny because for months, everyone's been talking about, Florida State and Clemson, 1,000% Big Ten. They've already got their bids. There's this Twitter account who tweets like 10,000 times per day. The guy doesn't sleep. He doesn't blink. He's always talking about how Florida State's already got their Fox approval and Big Ten approval. If they land in the Big 12, it's like, oh, what was that all about the whole time? So I don't know. Again, this conference realignment, these conversations have been so fluid that who knows how this is going to wind up. But the latest buzz has been Florida State and Clemson potentially to the Big 12. That came out yesterday. And yeah, I don't know if that would be so attractive for me as a Miami guy. I very much have a wait and see approach. And how can I not have a wait and see approach? Because Miami, obviously, they're not being as aggressive right now as Clemson and Florida State. We're literally suing the ACC to try to get out. So I have no choice but be patient to see how this plays out. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure to smash that like button, hit that thumbs up, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.